Hey, everybody. Happy Monday to you. Welcome. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Lots to cover today. Lots to cover. Start off with Bitcoin, as always. My clickbait title is not referring to a cycle of Bitcoin. I have no idea if it's over or not. A lot of people think we're going to correct. What I'm showing you now here on the power curve, as usual, is just the middle 60%, roughly two-thirds of the time. 80th percentile on the top, 20th percentile on the bottom. That means 1.3x the power curve or 0.4x the power curve. All right, where we are right now, just below the 50th. All right, so 0.7x the power curve. That's the price we're at right now at 90K. Okay, power curve's 126K. 126K. Crazy things going on in the world. Going to update you a little bit, but I want to go through, before we get to that, some monetary base info. All right, again, this is a unique quarter. I'm waiting all the way until the last quarter has been done because the U.S. Federal Reserve has been so late in publishing money supply data for the broad money, which I need for M3, which you don't see anywhere else. You just got to go in and create the actual set. And of course, there's a lot of other money supplies which are not always apples to apples. So we'll get there. But anyway, here's the economically comparable money supply to Bitcoin. Okay, that is the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, i.e., the monetary base. Now, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet is, you could argue, not exactly the printing press. The monetary base is a slight subset of this, but it doesn't matter. You find the monetary base on the Fed's balance sheet, and basically the Fed is, whether they're printing money for the Treasury, printing money for banks, or printing money for us, i.e. with dollar bills, it's all included in this figure. All right. So this is the max balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, and as you see, we are about, at the moment, 28%, 27, 28% of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. That is where Bitcoin stands at the moment. All right. Now, I showed you this last week. I'm going to show it now in euros. All right. So in native terms, I think it's more helpful. And also showing Bitcoin in euros. So here's euro. Now, this is the same deal. This is the monetary base of the European Central Bank. Okay. So you can see very similar in the global financial crisis. They had kind of, they were trying to figure it out, and they had a major QE. This was during the Greek crisis, was right here. Were increasing their balance sheet while the Federal Reserve was decreasing its. All right, this goes all the way back to 1914. But all right, so the Federal Reserve was decreasing their balance sheet. European Central Bank was increasing their balance sheet, more and more euros. Got to almost 5 trillion euros on the eve of silly season. Silly season started, and then we get nearly to 9 trillion euros. They've brought it down. How low can it go? That's the question. Bitcoin is actually over trend here. I'm not saying trend is gospel. Probably the most gospel power trend is going to be the power trend in dollar terms. All right. But if we were going to say, you know, how is Bitcoin doing relative to the Euro's balance sheet? A little bit ahead of schedule. We're 24%, whereas the trend says we should be at 16%. Okay, so that's interesting, right? Federal Reserve, we're under trend. Euro, we're over trend. Let's go to the pound sterling. We passed this last year, okay? So this is very interesting now. We see that Bitcoin in market cap terms in sterling is above the value of the Bank of England. 172%. Okay. 100% is equal, 200% is double. So we are getting close to double. All right. Let's take Bitcoin off. So you just in general notice how it's a similar pattern with all central banks. They had their QE 1, 2, 3 kind of thing, and then silly season just exploded. And then they're trying to rein it in for the last 2-3 years. Whereas Bitcoin, again, relative to the trend says we should be at, this is kind of interesting, we should be at 531%. Okay. But we are only at 172%. So it's, this is log scale on the right. All right, let me take off log just so you can see that. This is linear now on the right. This is penetration or, percent increase. So you see this is 531%, which is the trend. And we're only down here. So Bank of England is, let's say, holding its own against the trend. But Bitcoin is more than, it's almost double the Bank of England balance sheet. And I pointed this out when we passed it last year, right about there, which was about a year ago. No, sorry, about 2 years ago. 2 years ago, February 2024. I made some tweets about that and haven't looked back. I am curious if we will ever hit this again, right? The trend says we should be, 5, 6x. We are nearly 2x. But you never know. Bitcoin could go into a bear. Bank of England could print more. I'm not sure if this one's completely in the rearview mirror, but, still looking pretty good for Bitcoin. Although it is, interestingly, sort of behind schedule. If you want to say this schedule is gospel, which I'm not saying that it is, only 89% R squared here. This is monthly. Still pretty interesting. All right, now, Iran is exploding right now, literally burning every day. We're going to talk about that. So I figured, why not show you Iran? Congratulations if you watch this channel, because you're just never going to find, you're not going to find this data anywhere else. I don't say that to be snarky, just to say that the Iranian central bank is extremely hard to access. I tried to get it there this morning, and I imagine if you try, go to Wikipedia, find their link, click the link, maybe use a VPN before you click the link, and you're not going to be able to connect. Right? So that's just kind of funny in some respects, in that the central bank of a 70 million person nation cannot even be accessed online, but this is the world we live in. So I only have data to here. This is in native real, so I don't have the data prior to February 2025. Right? They're very bad in updating it generally, but I haven't gotten, whenever I did my last update, I checked it. This was the latest data I could get. All right, so this is all I have. Let me explain this number for you. All right, this is in native real, Iranian real, just straight up. It is as crazy as it looks. That number says 12 million billion. All right, so how large is that? That is 12,700 trillion, or 12.7 quadrillion. All right, so 12.7 quadrillion Iranian rial. That is the size of their balance sheet, or more specifically, it's the monetary base here. I'm kind of mixing terms, but it doesn't matter. It's a very similar metric. Iranian central bank, the size of the money that goes through the system at the core level. All right, this is the most economically analogous money supply to Bitcoin for at the central bank level, at the state level. 12.7 quadrillion real. All right, so again, congratulations for tuning in. to this channel because you're not going to see analysis like this anywhere else. Let's see where Bitcoin fits in. Let's measure Bitcoin in real. You ready for this one? Can you see it? There it is. There it is. All right, so you can start to see the benefit of a hard money system. Imagine, being Peter Schiff and trying to fight this trend. All right, so this is Bitcoin measured in real. All right, all $1.8 trillion. What's the market cap right now? Roughly $1.8 trillion. All right, measured in real. That's 2,400 quadrillion. What's bigger than quadrillion? Quintillion? Let's look at the progression. Look at that. It's still a power law. Still a power law. All right, there's a log scale on the right. Bitcoin passed the Iranian real, by the way, and this is black market real. Okay, so I'm putting all the Bitcoin number in. This is fairly, the Iranian market with such a deep diaspora that they have is pretty robust, like the Argentine market, the peso market. So they have a pretty clear black market rate you can find online. This is the black market rate. They passed the central bank balance, Bitcoin passed the central bank balance sheet of Iran all the way back in the 2017 run, which it did with many currencies. Right, with many currencies was in 2017. But never looking back, now the size of Bitcoin relative to the central bank of Iran is 200 times greater. So congratulations on being in Bitcoin. This is what I'm trying to say when I talk about backing up, right? Like, the world is on fire. It is wild. People are trying to trigger you all over the place in social media. But I mean, Iranians that have this are protected. Their purchasing power is protected. It may be very hard. It may be very costly to get in and out of Bitcoin. I understand the tether market's pretty big in Iran. People don't understand Bitcoin, but as far as having a store of value, store of wealth, a wealth store for an Iranian family, the Bitcoin system is now 200 times larger than their central bank. And actually, maybe slightly less. Well, doesn't really matter. I was going to say because theoretically this number is even higher, which would make the Bitcoin multiple slightly less, but it doesn't really matter. 200 times higher. All right. On schedule, actually behind schedule, just like with sterling. Should be 400 times. So this is a log scale. It's kind of interesting. You look at this and it almost sets things in perspective to what's actually happening, right? I mean, look at that on linear scale. Okay, so the trend is not Bitcoin is not exactly keeping on that trend, but look at it if it did. All right, we're reaching liftoff phase. Let's go back to the sterling. Okay. We should be 5x. We're only 2x. So we're a little bit behind. A little bit behind. But this, I think, can, again, the idea is to back it up, try to relax, not watch too many YouTube thumbnails. Good morning, John. Good morning, Jukebox. Oh, yeah, no, that's true. They closed the internet. That's true. But I get on there every quarter, sometimes more often. It's very spotty. Getting there's been stretches like for a year, which I couldn't get on. Maybe back in 2020. When did they have their last major revolution against the hijab? I think it was 2020, 2021. It doesn't necessarily matter that the internet is officially closed or not. It's very difficult to get on that website. Very non-transparent place. But this is what Bitcoin looks like from the perspective of the Iranian real universe. And it's a giant. All right. So we know this is coming for the euro, right? No matter what Christine Lagarde says, we know this is coming. We may be, see how we're not quite at crazy liftoff phase, right? This should be helpful, right? We should be maybe say 24%. We're only 16% of the European monetary base, and 3 years from now we should be 31%. But when you have such a disastrous currency, 3 years from now we should be, instead of 400 times, we should be, that's 1,000, 2,000 times. I mean, this is puts things in perspective, I think. We'll come back to this. I want to go a little bit political. So speaking of Iran, 500 to 3,000 reportedly dead. Of course, it's a Russian-backed regime. Of course, they're going to be brutal. This is not going to stop. They're going to try to crack down. It's all they can do is crack down. We're going to have to see. Internet's closed, as you said, jukebox. But there are people with Starlink terminals, people trying to get the word out. I hope that they do. And again, I don't mean to sort of sound like I'm lecturing here, but this is where I think the free world should shine. No matter what you think about anybody's politics, these people need help, and they're asking for help, okay? So this woman, true hero, right? I've seen her at the Human Rights conference in Oslo Freedom Forum in Oslo. Just another heroic world champion athlete. All right, doesn't really matter. You protest, you're at risk of dying. She's been sending many videos. They're asking for help. All right, here's another good one again. I don't watch rage Twitter a lot. I definitely don't watch these shows. Like, I could care less about any of these shows. But Anna Kasparian from, the sort of wacko left is saying that it's really great, but, the freedom in Iran should not be U.S. and Israel led. Again, I don't really think there's any room to talk here. I mean, should it be, Saudi oil kingdom led? I mean, this is at the end of the day, it's going to be about human rights. The Iranian people that I'm following most closely are asking for help. They're not asking for help. It's the same thing that happened to us in the 80s. I have some things to say about U.S. help, which I always do, which is not typically great for the little person. As I said, in the Baltics in 1991, when we started our independence movements, we actually started it right in 1990, a few months after the Berlin Wall fell in November 1989. But as I've said before, the U.S. asked us to go on a pause. All right, they asked us to go on a pause for our independence movements. And they were doing everything they could to bend over backwards to appease the aggressor, to appease Moscow, to appease the Russians, to make them not feel too bad, that their people were rebelling. Let's just, calm down, take a pause. So this is what people got to deal with. The large powers are going to try to go over the heads of the people as they finally rise up and demand freedom. Just a nice response here from Sean, of course, as always. Russian disinfo. It's a main pillar of Russian disinfo, by the way, is Twitter. X, whatever shithole name you want to give it. But Kirill Dmitriev, just hilarious that he's lecturing on Twitter. This platform is banned in Russia. YouTube, essentially banned in Russia. It's not, I think officially it's throttled beyond use. It's like the Iranian central bank website. All right. So the fact that they're talking, this guy is trying to talk about how the UK wants to ban Twitter. It is banned in Russia. All right. This loser, this head of the Russian sovereign wealth fund, which is basically Putin's slush fund. This is what we're up against. All right. From the idiot left to the fascist wacko right that wants to be buddies with Putin. Here's one I would highly recommend. This is actually from November. I just saw it. It's from the Davis Center. All right, so one of my favorite politicians, former foreign minister of Lithuania, Gabrielis Landsbergis, talking about Eastern Europe. This is from November, so it was pre the loan to Ukraine for defending themselves, which Europe finally got their head of their ass and gave it to Ukraine, although in my opinion it's very sad that they did not take the frozen reserves of Russia. Again, like Russia has a guarantee to some product. We're already at anarchy here in international law. I think that should be clear. This is what my title of my video today means. It's already over. It's over. All right. So Bitcoin is the only neutral currency. If you want to actually hold something, hold Bitcoin. The fact that Russia can do trillions of dollars of damage in Ukraine and then cry to all the holy heavens that their 200 billion, which is actually 300 billion, but 210 billion is controlled in Europe. International reserves are at risk is just, again, it's beyond parity. But the message I just want to get out again is you're going to keep hearing that, Russia, the definition of fascism is basically a group that is not really oppressed claims oppression against another group. Okay, this is exactly what Russia is doing. It's exactly what Chinese do against the Uyghurs. They claim that they're somehow aggrieved, that they're the aggressor, and they're actually invading another country. All right, so this is coming to the West. I hope America can stop it. Europe, again, needs to get their head out of their ass. But how much longer are you going to take Russia saying that they are the aggrieved ones here, that somehow their rights are being violated while they kill Ukrainians every day? So anyway, I'd highly recommend this video. Just a couple more. This is just getting very interesting. All right, the Russian mill bloggers, the Telegram channels, they're beside themselves. All right, again, I don't get in there. I don't watch them. It's just good to find quick hits that can give you this information. All right, but they're getting humiliated on a global scale with the shadow tankers finally being boarded by the U.S. All right, which I'll talk about in a second, and obviously just their humiliation in Ukraine. Let's read it. Many who understand what is happening are concerned about the real, including international reputation of the motherland, are in a quiet depression. Everyone is waiting for at least some kind of statement from the supreme leader. I mean, it's just fascist talk right here. It's hilarious. They're falling everywhere. They're losing their allies. All right, Assad's down. It's like dictator bingo. We got Yanukovych, kicked the whole thing off in 2014. He's in Russia. Assad's down. He's in Russia. Maduro was going to be maybe in Turkey. That was, I guess, the last negotiated place for him to go. Unfortunately, Trump stopped that. He's in the U.S. So now it's the Ayatollah, and it is no one's really going after Kim Jong-un with his nukes. So it's a good lesson about nukes again. Another news, if you didn't see this, all right, this was yesterday, I believe, was the actual day. The conflict, all right, in Ukraine began on February 24th, 2022, and reached 1,418 days by early 2026, mirroring the span from Nazi Germany's Operation Barbarossa in 1941 to its 1945 surrender. Russian forces fight for small gains near Pokrovsk and Donetsk, controlling about 20% of Ukraine amid a stalemate, with Ukraine's general staff reporting over 1.2 million Russian losses, and Zelensky citing at least 1,000 daily deaths since December. Independent counts confirm the 160,000 Russian deaths by late 2025, while Zelensky calls for more Western aid to counter the attrition, and neither side claims a decisive win. So again, this is decisively a loss continually for Russia. I'm going to show this in chart form now. All right. Good morning, BTC Moon Guy. Look at this. This line right about here represents about 20% of Ukraine. All right. Here they got to almost 30. All right. I'm not showing you the total. 160,000 square kilometers. Do the math. Was roughly a third. A little bit less than a third, as I understand. A little bit less than 30% here at March 2022. This was their height. All right. Then they lost. They got pushed back, and they've been incredibly small gains from here. And let me just do the exact. It's something like 5%. I'll do it for you right here. The simple math. But if you count from the worst part of their defeat, which was the end of 2022, all right, 105,000 square kilometers to now it's 116, 117. Let's even say 120. Sorry, where is it? 20 divided by 105. Just get so 14%. And I don't even think that's the number. Let's say 115 divided by 105. 9%. 9 to 10%, basically, they take it. Now, they are throwing human lives. This is the Russian way. Care nothing about human lives. They just throw them at the problem. But they're now losing 10 people per every square kilometer of occupied territory that they hold. The question is going to be, how long is it going to go? All right. Europe needs to do more. There's even more committed above this now, at least 100 billion more. Above the number you see here. They've committed 185 billion. Europe has. Notice it's never been as high as the U.S. Never, not once. Although Trump likes to say it, but we'll let that go. All right, let's go back here. Same thing about how every day Russia threatens to attack the Baltics. They threaten to nuke us. They threaten Poland. They threaten Berlin. The fact that it's taken them longer than it took the Soviets to counter the Nazis, which, by the way, they always want to hide this part of the history. They start World War II in Russia from 1941. They completely ignore the pact that they had with the Nazis from the end of 1939 until 1941, June. So the first 2 years, they completely whitewash it from their history. The fact that they can't take 3 cities, 3 villages in the Ukrainian countryside, whereas in 1945 they made it all the way to Berlin. If this isn't like just showing you how much of a mockery this country is, how much of a mockery dictatorships are, again, I don't know what it is. Again, I'm speaking as a European here now. I know it confuses people with my American accent, and I have dual loyalty, but I'm speaking as a European. These guys are absolute titans, as it says here. I mean, 131 days without rotation, 94 days without rotation. These guys just standing strong in the cold, minus 10 Celsius. It really is unbelievable. And as Kasparov says, Europe is surviving because of them. So we're going to see how united Europe can get. This is why I seriously would recommend this. If you're European, you want to see how you can be united. Yes, we are singing songs above our fighting weight in the Baltics because we don't have huge armies. We don't have huge GDPs. If you want to be, Germany is not going to be able to compete with America on its own, neither with China. Right? You have to look at this from a bloc perspective if you want to to compete. So I want to show you that. I want to show you that. Here we go. This is the amazing thing. There's a lot I don't agree with, the Trump admin, as you might know if you've been following this channel. But the fact that they have now seized 5 of their Shadow Fleet tankers, it's a complete. Again, this goes back to the humiliation from the mill bloggers. This is a complete disaster for Russia. I mean, the great Russian bear protecting all their people. They're violating all sorts of rules and norms. I already know, like, we don't have international law. That's fine. That's the back to the title of this video. It's definitely over. All right, we're in a world where great powers are taking a larger role. The U.S. is really not going to play by its own rules. It's going to make up its own rules. And yet, this is what we have been saying for 4 years. Sanctions aren't going to work unless you enforce them. If you're going to let Russia roam the seas with their rusty, oily, dirty tankers that aren't insured and just, sanction their official vessels but not their unofficial vessels, it's not going to work. Finally, the U.S. is doing it, I think, because Trump is so exasperated with Putin's lies that he's just like, all right, you're not going to do anything with Venezuela anymore. That message, I think, is clear. The question I would have for Europe is Europe going to do this? All right, is the Baltic Sea going to do this? We had another 2 weeks ago, another cable between, I think it was still Estonia and Finland was cut. I can't even remember anymore. I showed you guys a couple streams ago, at least 11 cable cuts in the last 2 years from anchor drags. Of course, this is an act of war, but they don't call it that. This is what it is. They're at war. They're at war. Are you going to admit it? All right. Their last stronghold in the European Union is the Orban administration. All right, so here's a pro-Ukrainian, pro-Hungarian, pro-European blogger here. I'm not going to get into this too much. I don't know the ins and outs of Hungarian politics. Everybody says he doesn't have the support. People are finally rising up. We're going to have to see. I mean, it's early. It's really wild. This Magyar, which means Hungarian, right? The opposition guy is named Magyar. I mean, to me, it seems like dangerous for him. Everything is really. It's going to be very, very interesting what happens here in April in Hungary. Again, I did this out of order. I posted this. If you haven't seen this, I would suggest you watch it. The Russians telling this African, look, as they load him up with an anti-tank mine on his vest, just telling him to go and walk. And he himself's probably drugged up. The people that are talking are drugged up. This is the Russian way, and it's very, very good that videos are getting out like this. This is the same regime that is holding up the Ayatollahs right now, the mullahs in Tehran. Okay, back to Hungary. This one I think is very interesting. So there's varying degrees of the right-wingers in Europe. All right, some I think some are not as fascist as others, but it's very interesting that all of them. All right. And by the way, like Malay's on this list. I would not call him fascist. But some I would here. Le Pen, I mean, her father is a card-carrying Nazi member. So it's not too hard to call that one. But the little video endorsements he got from the hard right in Europe was interesting, except he didn't get one from Trump advance. This will be interesting to see how this plays out. Trump likes a winner. I keep going back to the tweet that he made in September of 2024 saying, after finally learning about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I realized Russia's a paper tiger. And then, of course, he goes back to trying to do a deal with Putin with his golfing buddy Witkoff. We're going to see if Trump is going to keep inserting himself into losers, because these guys, all indications are they're going to lose. But of course, again, we're going to have to see how these elections play out. The Georgian elections were rigged. It was shown with a lot of research. So the Russians inserted themselves there. They're just going to have to see if it happens with Hungary. Jay in Kiev, who's a very good follower, says Avant's involvement will dock them 5 points. I have no idea. I'm not going to talk more about it, but interesting to see that Trump advance, at least so far, have not inserted themselves into Hungarian politics, but they certainly would like the corrupt leader of now the poorest country in the EU to win. Sure, you guys saw this. Back to the money. This is wild. So, lawsuit from the DOJ against the Federal Reserve. I don't really care one way or another what you think about what the Fed might do or not vis-a-vis the Trump administration. But if Trump fully gets the Federal Reserve, I would say that's another step towards a relatively fascist administration. I'm not a fan of the Fed. I don't apologize for the Fed. You guys know you got to be in Bitcoin to protect yourself from this stuff. But it would be interesting if the Federal Reserve finally goes down at the hands of, a sort of Caesar-like, czar-like figure that just wants more and more power and takes them over. You can argue that the Federal Reserve would always do the president's bidding, no matter right or left, come election time. I think there's a lot of good arguments for that as well. But he wants it known that he wants lower interest rates, even though Powell's on his way out. So, like the many wild lawsuits that this administration has put on, putting it on the Federal Reserve itself is pretty drastic. So we're going to see. Here's again, my advice: don't watch the assholes. Just watch the people that know history comment on them. Okay, that's what I like to do. So here's again Radoslaw Sikorski, Poland's foreign minister, true patriot. He was helping not, as he calls it, the radical Taliban, but people that actually wanted freedom in Afghanistan in the 80s against the Soviets, right? And he was, from Poland, but he was in exile. He grew up in the UK. All right, so somehow I forget how he made it out, but he got out. Maybe it was an exchange program. He got out of Poland, communist Poland, Warsaw Pact Poland, and made his way to the UK. And I think he's a very strong light for liberty and freedom in the current political situation. And as I've mentioned already before, the U.S. did not declare war on Germany when Hitler invaded Poland. So Tucker, trying to make his goofy points, just doesn't like to call it as he sees it. All right, and if you follow him for history, you're going to find a lot of BS there. Same way people are saying, Orban said it's not clear that Ukraine didn't invade Russia. It's just not clear. This is where they're trying to take the political dialogue now that they have nothing else. A lot of these fascist maniacs. So, and then of course Tucker, this is just funny. He was railing against Trump's removing of Maduro, claiming it was a global homo plot. I don't even know what that means. You can tell me in the comments. I have no idea. But apparently he said that. And then yesterday he showed up at Trump's meeting with the oil executives to discuss Venezuela's oil. Really hard to sort of square that one. But I think freedom is going to prevail, at least in Eastern Europe, as it has been for the last 30 years. But the game is totally changed. I think anybody who tells you otherwise is completely ignoring the facts. It has totally changed. Putin has the last grips on this Iranian regime. All right, he did nothing to help them last summer when the Americans took their B-2s to bust up their nuclear bunkers, which, again, arguable how much damage they actually did. But Russian air defenses certainly didn't do anything. This is the next step. So it's a weird time. I would say very different than what I recall in the 1990s, and then, of course, learning about it more later as I was quite young in the 1990s, and I wasn't there, right? Grew up in the US, but the feeling of freedom that I know all of Eastern Europe was having after the Berlin Wall came down, but it came in steps, and usually the United States was not very helpful. Though they would say the right things, they were actually trying to help the regimes that were still in power. So it's, we saw what happened in Syria. They completely fell. House of cards. Assad went to Russia, as you do. Stay with your dictator buddy. Venezuela is a dicey situation, right? We have just the dictator removed, but Trump wants to work with the complete corrupt regime there. So we're going to see how that works out. And then Iran is going to be as violent as they could possibly be. There's no way they're not going to kill more people to hold on to their power. So, there's always been reports that the gold is gone to Moscow, as you do. Take your gold while your people are tired of being oppressed. So we're going to see how that plays out. But super dangerous time. And like I said, in the 90s, the hardest part about the independence movement was what came after, right? Because there was nothing there. I mean, it was a blank sheet of paper. You had the Soviet Union, shithole society that it was, the whole makeup of leftist communist ideology. And then you had to replace that with a capitalist society, and people didn't really know how to do it. So there's also one of the funny things. A lot of people, again, like to say, oh, poor Russia, the poor Russian aggressor. They had such a difficult time in the 90s. I've heard this a lot. Everybody in the Warsaw Pact countries had a difficult time in the 90s. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Czechs, Slovaks, the Balts, Bulgaria, Romania. Everybody had a difficult time. The Georgians, Azeris. So it's not like it was easy. So it's going to be the same here. If these guys finally get freedom, they'll get the support of some international, like if they finally have true freedom where there's no Ayatollahs saying death to America, death to Israel, wear the hijab, and if that actually occurs, they're going to need as much help as they can get. And I imagine there'll be a huge influx of support from the Iranian diaspora. But it's not going to be easy. The hardest thing is going to be after the revolution. All right? It's just like, I'm not following Syria enough, but I'm sure right now that's the hardest thing for them. Especially when you got a former Al-Qaeda member who is your president. The hardest thing about bringing in freedom is going to be, managing a society that you've never even had any concept of, having private property, having the ability to buy stuff on the open market, to buy hard assets, to buy productive assets, to take over factories. The mafia is going to be there. 100% there's going to be a mafia. There's going to be different factions that are going to compete for protection. And you're just going to have to see how it works. Hello, Bitcoin Polska. How you doing? Hello, Daniel. Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with the sentiment. The question is timeline, right? If we could do it all now, we'd do it now. Bitcoin Network can't do it alone, right? Peter Todd said that at the one of the panels I was on with him, and In Finland, if the Trump administration, Trump seems to be pretty friendly to Bitcoin because of and shit coins, but if the Trump administration, we've seen how draconian they can be on certain things in the U.S., and obviously there's a major issue with what happened in Minneapolis with the ICE death. People on the right are going to call it self-defense. People on the left are going to call it murder, but at least you should investigate. Anyway, you see what happens there. I already lost my train of thought, but it's going to be, it's not, the point is it's not going to be, oh, I know what I'm saying. If Trump really wanted to put the screws on, every single Bitcoin company to do what he wanted, to treat every customer the way that he wanted, I mean, he could do it. You start running through the courts in America, but there's going to need to be a political solution at some point because it's still, you have this sort of crossroads between fiat and Bitcoin, which, again, I wish there was a faster way to do it. Use Bitcoin for sure. Use it, send it, receive it. Use it as much as you can. But these guys are going to protect what they have for a long time. They're not doing a very good job of it. If you look at the way that this balance sheet moves, right? Completely wacky. At least before, it looked kind of, a little bit of dips here and there, like kind of organic, right? Little big spike here in Y2K. It's not at all organic anymore. It's just completely state controlled. So I certainly agree with your sentiment. I'm not apologizing for the way they run the fiat system. It's abhorrent. But they got the guns. So you got to stay free. Use Bitcoin. I think the free speech thing is also very interesting, right? I just can't say this enough. What's this one? Where was it? Where was it? Did I already miss it? The Kasparian? Yeah. These guys, I mean, this platform is banned in Russia. How could anyone read what this asshole says and take it seriously? This platform is banned in Russia, and he's trying to troll the UK. I say this all the time. There is something special about the rights, particularly that Americans have, with the Bill of Rights. There's not, it's arguable. The UK has lots of problems with their internet free speech, as we all know. But it's nothing like Russia. I mean, you're talking about, if you want to talk about UK cases, which again, I'm not even going to use the word justified, but let's say legitimate threat to someone's health, like to someone's, like if someone threatens someone legitimately online. I've tried to read some of this stuff. There's like a lot of gray cases, but let's say whatever, that's 1,000. That's over the number. Is my understanding. It's like hundreds maybe. All right. So, but let's say it's 1,000. All right. You're talking about 1,000 cases in the UK of illegitimate. And I don't even know if there's been any actual arrests, but there's been whatever fines, people's come in. I don't even actually care, to be honest, because the numbers are so insignificant. UK needs to reform it. Everybody says that they should reform it. But if this hate speech law in the UK really was trying to protect, say, 1,000 people, and 1,000 people got questioned or whatever, reform it. It's terrible. You're talking about 1,000 people in the UK versus, this asshole's whole country is suppressed. It's not apples to apples. Like this is why I keep trying to bring it up. Keep it in mind. This is why I showed the Ryan Macbeth video after the shooting, the ICE shooting. Particularly in the U.S., you got Team Red, Team Blue. 30% of these comments are bots. 30% of these people that want to just fuel hatred, division. They're not free movements. I mean, they're just, you know, I gotta find the other one. There were those. Wasn't there a side note? These Rubio ones just keep getting better and better. Did you see he actually responded? He said something like, I won't be taking the starting QB job for Miami this weekend. These are pretty good. Well, it's just not, again, not that I really care what people think, but I'm not defending it. But it is true, like just the fungibility of the money, the way the system works. There is no other way there. It's not. It's not. If the debt goes up, if deficits increase, yeah, there is. You can borrow more as a government, which you should, and they will in the future, in a Bitcoin system. Um, but there is sort of a level of fungibility. I'll show you with the chart. Which people will need, just even at least for the cash that they need. But again, that sounds like I'm defending it, and absolutely not. But the Bitcoin system, let's see if where's our Federal Reserve? Bitcoin Fed value comparison. If you guys haven't seen this, this is a couple months old, but it should be more or less updated. All right. Can that be? Actually, I won't show that because I'm not sure that. Uh, 1 second. Does anybody know the annual number? No, not the annual number, but the annual value of transactions, because I'm getting a number that might be too low, but let me check. 1 second. Sorry for the dead time. Yeah, I got to update this because it's not right on point. But in any event, the number, after all that dead time, the number is we're still something like second. after all that time, we're still something like 150 to 180 times smaller the volume that the Federal Reserve does in a year. Federal Reserve does like this is in value. It's velocity times transaction per day. So it's something like, in the course of a year, Fedwire, which is the most apples to apples payment system for the US, and it's not only the US, but it's for the US, analogous to Bitcoin system payment, is $1.1 quadrillion worth of payments a year. 1.1 quadrillion. Bitcoin does 7, 8, whatever. So you're not even 1%, bottom line. So it's going to come, and I can't wait for it to come, but it's going to take a long time. And I didn't even read your comment, Bitcoin Polska, but that's the same deal that I would say, totally. But yeah, this is more the year of political upheaval, I think. If anybody was doubting it, I just don't think you need to doubt it anymore. The Russians last week, as I talked about, sent an intermediate ballistic missile on Lviv. This is like the 4th time they've done it. They hit Dnipro at the start of Trump's first term. It's like November 2024. They did it as well before, but the Ukrainians have been analyzing the remains, and it was hilarious. One of the CNN went there, all right, and looked at it, and the people were talking about how the gyroscopes were used during Yuri Gagarin's time, and there's like a bunch of Soviet light bulbs and things in there. So, international law, to the extent that it exists, and I don't really think it exists, but to the extent that it exists, it's getting a massive shakeup. And it's all, the US is already telegraphing what they're going to do. I think Trump likes a winner. He's doing this because he sees that Putin, after a year of his bullshit, which again, we all could have told him this a year ago, and even before that, remember, he said he'd solve the war in one day. So he has no concept of the conflict in Ukraine. But after he just sees, it's now been longer than the Russian campaign from Stalingrad to Berlin. It's been longer. And these assholes still can't take the Donbass, which is, mind, they still have not taken a full region in Ukraine. The regions that Trump's golfing buddy Steve Witkoff couldn't name, he said Crimea. He said Crimea and Donbass. Neither of those are the territories that Putin is trying to take hold of. Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson. These are the 4 regions. Since the war started in 2022, and Donetsk and Luhansk are the 2 regions since 2014, Russia has not occupied one of those regions in totality. All right, they don't have the full capture of any region. So they're just going to keep the human rights abuses up. They're going to throw, they're going to throw Africans at it now. Also, another thing I meant to talk about, I forgot to pull it up. Where is the outrage, right? So, like, how, of all of the outrage that has been poured out from the lefty, liberal establishment in universities in America, here's John Cleese explaining that this is a Python sketch. All right, you got free Iran protesters clashing with like desperate housewives, white ladies in Washington. that are pro-Hamas. It's remarkable. And literally a Python sketch. So it's very exciting, but this one, we had deaths in the Baltics, maybe in totality 50. Um, even less than that. But there were a few added on after because there was something that happened at the time. I'm counting Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia in total. Maybe it was like 30, but then there were some that were added on later because of whatever heart attacks or some other things. But you can say that it was relatively peaceful, but it was also super risky. And the United States was almost like now, just standing kind of wishy-washy, standing on the sideline, not doing anything, of course. This United States is a lot different than the Bush 1 administration, which was in charge in 1990 and 1991 in America. But it's going to be up to the little guy. It's going to be up to friends and family of Iranians, people that, human rights agencies, anybody that can get in to help. But it's going to be up to the people at the end of the day. I really hope that they can get their freedom. I mean, I cannot imagine being on the other side of this argument, supporting a dictator. Any idiot that supports, Orban, Putin, Khamenei, like these I hope all of these guys fall. Question is just how many people they're going to bring down with them, and it's wild. So, yeah, bottom line, we got time as far as the monetary stuff with Bitcoin goes. I would leave you again here. All right, you see how steep the power curve rolls in a matter of years for something like Iran. Again, remember, Bitcoin's way larger than the central bank of Iran's balance sheet, all right, measured in real. Way larger. All right, $1.8 trillion of Bitcoin here. Way larger than, and you see 200 times going to right, here's the 1,000 times, 2,000 times by 2028. It's almost like Bitcoin can show you on a chart how unsustainable a regime is. The big currencies are moving much slower. Much slower. So that's what we have to deal with. Also, like I said, less than 1% of transactions that the Federal Reserve does a year, and that's just the Federal Reserve, Bitcoin does. Bitcoin does less than 10 trillion a year. The Federal Reserve does 1.1 quadrillion, 1,100 trillion. And Donald Trump is ready to take it over. That's not the one I wanted to show. So it's going to be wild. It's not every day is going to get more interesting, but I'll try to keep you guys relatively untriggered, just focused on freedom stuff here. So let me know if you have any more questions or anything you want to chart, but that's all I had for you today. Watch this video. I would say, again, the cool thing about Eastern Europe still, even though we have Hungary, sort of cheap dictator Orban to deal with, but generally in Eastern Europe, communism is too close in our past to forget. I think Americans have forgotten what real freedom means, and big strongman Donald Trump is threatening to show them at least what his version of freedom means. We'll have to see. But this is a good interview because, again, this guy's grandfather was basically one of the main guys that led Lithuania, and then eventually the Baltics were all following. But he was the first one. Lithuania was the first one out of the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of wisdom in a video like this. And I would just say, if you're young, trying to figure out all this stuff, trying to figure out the political economy of the times that we're in, a lot of this stuff has happened before. It's going to happen in the future. Bitcoin is clearly the only way. But there's going to be a lot of bumps in the middle. That's all I have, guys. So I will leave you there. Thank you for watching. Have a great week. More to come on the charts. I'm just working a lot in the back end with this, but it's going to take some time to bring it to you. But hopefully have more charts like this where you can, personally check it out and play around with these on your phone or computer or wherever. So I don't really tell people to like, subscribe, whatever, but if you want, this is my website. You can check it out. You can go to, if it ever loads, you can go to Nostra as well. I'm on there. And you can donate with BTC if you so choose. So thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. Slava Ukraine. Take care.